The envelope was thick, yellowed at the edges like something out of another decade. And maybe it was. Mark Reynolds stared at it for a long minute before sliding a callous finger under the flap. His hands didn't work quite like they used to. Arthritis, the VA doctor said, just another gift from the years spent crawling through jungles in Vietnam, then crawling through life after. It was nearly midnight. The farmhouse kitchen in Pine Hollow, Iowa, was lit by a single bulb hanging above the table. Outside, snow began to fall, soft, quiet, almost respectful. The kind of snow that muffled the world. He pulled out the letter slowly. The handwriting was familiar, painfully so. Graceful cursive. His mother's. She'd been gone 12 years. "Dearest Mark," it began. He sank into the old wooden chair, the one that creaked louder every year. The letter wasn't dated. But as his eyes scanned the words, his heart began to race. It wasn't just a letter. It was a confession, and a map. "I never told you the whole truth about what happened to your brother," it said. "I did what I thought was right at the time. But if you're reading this, it means it's time for you to know everything." Mark swallowed hard. His brother Tommy, the town's golden boy. Football prodigy. Gone in '79. A car crash, they said. Closed casket. But something in that letter, something about paralysis, training, and second chances, twisted everything he thought he knew. The next morning, Mark stood in the biting cold of the barn, the letter still tucked inside his flannel shirt pocket. He hadn't slept. The heater had gone out again, and truthfully, he didn't care. There were more important things rattling around his head now, like how a man could live half a life without knowing the other half was a lie. Tommy had been the heart of Pine Hollow back in the day. Blonde hair, $1 million smile, ran like a deer and threw like a cannon. High school all-state quarterback 3 years running. Scouts from Notre Dame and Michigan came all the way to Iowa just to watch him play. Mark had always been the quiet one, the bookworm, the artist. But Tommy had something special. And then, just like that, gone. After the funeral, their mother had locked up his room and never spoke of him again. Mark, grief-stricken and angry, joined the army 3 months later. He'd never forgive himself for leaving her alone with that sorrow, or for never asking more questions. Now, at 67, he felt like he was waking from a coma. He walked to the back of the barn and pulled open the old metal file cabinet. Dust rose in clouds. Inside were the fragments of another life, his own medals, photos, journals. But behind the drawer was a small wooden box. His mother's box. Inside, more letters, faded photos, and one newspaper clipping, yellow and brittle. The headline read, "Unknown man in wheelchair qualifies for Olympic trials, identity withheld by coach." The photo was blurry, but the face? Mark knew that jawline. Knew it like he knew his own. It was Tommy. Alive. Mark sat in his truck for over an hour, engine off, staring out across the frostbitten cornfields that lined County Road 9. The silence of Pine Hollow had always been comforting, a quiet broken only by the occasional snowplow or the sound of crows. But now it felt suffocating. Every inch of this town held a memory. Every mile reminded him of the day Tommy died, or the day he thought he did. He held the photo up to the windshield again. That face. It had aged, but the eyes were the same. Focused. Determined. Still full of fire. 1,000 questions twisted in his gut. Why hadn't his mother told him? Why had Tommy disappeared? Who had kept him hidden all these years? The clipping was dated 1996, over 25 years ago. Olympic trials. That would have made Tommy around 35 at the time. Was he still alive now? Where had he been? And why had no one in Pine Hollow ever known? The answer might lie in the return address scribbled hastily on one of the old envelopes, Santa Clara, California. Mark traced the ink with his finger. It was faded, but legible. There were no zip codes, no names, just a P.O. box. He checked his wallet, $173 in cash. Social Security check hit in 4 days. gas tank was half full. He hadn't left Iowa in over a decade, not since his wife Elaine passed. But something stirred in him now, the same spark he felt as a boy when he'd followed Tommy through the woods, certain there was something just over the next hill. With a grunt, Mark fired up the engine. The truck coughed, then roared to life. If Tommy was alive, Mark was going to find him. Even if it meant unraveling a past that everyone else wanted to forget. Mark hit I-80 westbound just after noon, the sky a flat gray dome stretching endlessly across the plains. Snow still clung to the edges of the highway like stubborn memories. As the miles ticked by, the silence inside the cab thickened. No radio. Just the hum of tires and the low growl of the old Dodge's engine. That suited Mark fine. He had too much to think about for music. Every exit sign seemed to carry a ghost, places they used to go as boys. Fielding. Omaha. Des Moines. He could almost hear Tommy's laugh, wild and loud, echoing off the cornfields. Mark hadn't realized how much he missed it until now. He stopped for gas in Lincoln, Nebraska, and caught himself looking twice at every man in a wheelchair. Tall ones, broad-shouldered. It was ridiculous, he knew, expecting a miracle at a truck stop, but he couldn't help it. By the time he crossed into Colorado, the sun was setting, painting the mountains in distant gold. He pulled into a roadside diner, the kind with formica tables and waitresses who called you Han. Over chicken fried steak, he pulled out one of the letters from the wooden box. It was dated February 1995. Dear Mama, it read, I know I can't come back. Not yet. Coach says I'm close. Real close. He believes I can do it, even in this chair. I don't want the world to see me until I'm ready to win. Until I prove I'm not broken. I'm gonna make you proud. Mark's hands trembled as he folded the letter. The waitress topped off his coffee and gave him a long look. You okay, sugar? Mark smiled, but his eyes stayed fixed on the letter. Not yet, he said softly. But maybe soon. 3 days later, Mark rolled into Santa Clara, California. The city was nothing like he remembered it from his army days, brighter, louder, faster. Silicon Valley had swallowed it whole. Towering tech buildings now stood where mom-and-pop shops once did. The sidewalks buzzed with earbuds, scooters, and youth. Mark felt like a visitor from another planet. He parked near the post office listed on the return envelope. P.O. Box 819. It was still there. Tucked in the far right column like it had waited for him all these years. He walked up slowly, heart hammering, and stared at it. There was no key. No way to open it. Just the faded black numbers and a strange sensation in his chest, like standing on the edge of a cliff, too afraid to jump, too alive not to. He went inside. The clerk was young, probably no older than 22, with an eyebrow ring and a skeptical glance. I'm looking for information on a box, Mark said, sliding the envelope forward. Used to be active here, back in the 90s. P.O. Box 819. The kid glanced at it. Records that old aren't public, sir. Especially not without a court order. Mark nodded. He expected that. I'm not asking for much. Just a name. A clue. Something. The kid hesitated, then lowered his voice. Off the record, there's an old guy comes in once a month. Still checks that box. Late 60s, wheelchair. Wears a faded USA track jacket. Talks to nobody. Some think he's homeless, but he's clean. Quiet. Mark's breath caught. When's he usually come? First Friday of every month. Around noon. Mark checked his watch. It was 11:52. Mark stepped outside and took a position across the street, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. His breath came out in little white clouds. The California air was cool but nothing like the Midwest, and yet his heart thudded harder now than it ever had in winter. He watched the sidewalk like a hawk. Every pedestrian, every shadow. At exactly 12:06 p.m., a figure rolled around the corner. Wheelchair. Gray at the temples. shoulders still broad under the faded fabric of a navy blue jacket with peeling letters, USA. Mark's knees nearly gave out. He watched as the man glided effortlessly up the ramp and into the post office. A silver ring hung on a chain around his neck. His hands were strong, calloused. Even in the wheelchair, he moved like an athlete, smooth, controlled, powerful. Mark didn't move. He couldn't. The man came back out a few minutes later, a small stack of mail in his lap. No hesitation, no looking around. He rolled past Mark without even a glance. But Mark saw it then, saw the scar just under his jawline. The one Tommy got when he crashed his bike into the neighbor's fence at age 9. 17 stitches. Their mother cried for a week. It was him. No doubt. Mark's voice caught in his throat, but then, like it belonged to someone else, it broke through. Tommy? The wheelchair stopped. The man didn't turn around immediately. He sat perfectly still, the breeze rustling the edge of his jacket. Then, slowly, he turned his head. Mark's eyes filled with tears. "It's me," he said. "It's Mark." A pause. Then, a whisper, like it came from the bottom of a well. "Marky?" For a long moment neither man moved. Time seemed to freeze, the noise of traffic fading into a muffled hush. Mark stepped forward slowly, as if approaching a wild animal, afraid it might vanish if he blinked. Tommy's eyes were locked on his brother's face, scanning every line, every wrinkle, every hard-earned year. You got old," Tommy finally said, a smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth. Mark let out a broken laugh, part relief, part heartbreak. "So did you." And then they embraced, or as close to an embrace as they could manage. Mark knelt down, gripping Tommy's shoulders, and Tommy reached up, pulling him close. They clung to each other in the middle of the sidewalk, two old men tangled in decades of silence. Neither one said, "I'm sorry." Not yet. The air between them was already thick with unspoken grief, years that could never be reclaimed, words left unsaid. But in that embrace was something better than apology, forgiveness. When they finally pulled apart, Mark was the first to speak. "You didn't die." Tommy looked down. "Might as well have." Mark shook his head. "Don't say that." Tommy stared at his lap, hands gripping the wheels of his chair. "I was supposed to win state, go to Michigan, make Mom proud. And instead, I woke up in a hospital with no feeling in my legs and a doctor telling me I'd never walk again. I couldn't face you. Or her. I figured it was better if everyone just remembered me the way I was." Mark sat on the curb beside him, his voice soft. "We didn't need you to be perfect, Tommy. We just needed you." Tommy didn't answer. But his jaw clenched, and a tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. They sat in the park across the street from the post office for hours, two old men wrapped in coats and memories. Birds chirped from the eucalyptus trees overhead, and somewhere nearby, a school bell rang. Time blurred. Tommy talked first, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. "They moved me to a rehab center down in LA after the accident," he said. "I was a mess. Couldn't feel anything from the waist down. Didn't want to live. Coach Bennett, remember him?" Mark nodded. "How could I forget? He made us run laps for laughing during the national anthem." Tommy smiled. "Yeah. That one. He found me in the hospital. Said I still had it in me, said I could compete. Not like before. But different. Wheelchair racing. Paralympics. I thought he was out of his mind. But I had nothing to lose." Mark leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You made it to the trials?" Tommy nodded, eyes far away now. "Atlanta. 96. I trained for years before that. Blood, sweat, blisters on my palms. But I was fast, Mark. Real fast. I qualified for the 100-meter sprint." Mark stared at him in disbelief. "Why didn't you call us? Tell Mom?" "Me?" Tommy's voice cracked. "Because I didn't want you to see me like that. Not until I had a medal. Not until I proved I was still worth something." Mark's hands trembled. She died thinking you were gone. Tommy swallowed hard, blinking against the sun. I know. I never stopped writing, though. I mailed letters to the farm. Every month. Kept the box in case, someday. Mark's voice broke. We never got them. I think she kept them from me. They sat in silence, the weight of a lifetime pressing down between them. Finally, Mark looked up. Did you win? Tommy smiled. Slow. Sad. Proud. I did more than win, he said. I made history. Tommy leaned back, his eyes closing for a moment as if to pull the memory from somewhere sacred. It was the final day of the Games. Atlanta. 1996 Paralympics. The stadium was packed, and it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Mark listened like a boy again, watching his hero speak. The rasp in Tommy's voice only made it feel more real, like each word was scraped from something deep inside. They put us in lanes like any other race. But I wasn't just racing the others, Tommy said. I was racing against the version of me that died back in Iowa. The boy who had it all. The son Mom deserved. The brother I left behind. He looked out across the grass. The gun went off, and for 10 seconds, I was free. No pain. No past. Just motion and air and fire in my blood. Mark could hardly breathe. You won? Tommy nodded slowly. Gold. By a fraction of a second. I broke the American record. People stood. Cheered. But I didn't raise my arms. Didn't smile. I just cried. Because you weren't there. Mom wasn't there. And I'd spent so long chasing a finish line that I forgot why I started. Mark reached out, placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. You think she didn't know? Tommy, she kept every clipping. Every letter. She just couldn't bring herself to tell me. I think she was protecting both of us. Hoping someday you'd come back on your own. Tommy wiped his eyes with his sleeve. I should have come sooner. Mark nodded. Yeah. But you're here now. And for the first time in decades, they both allowed themselves to believe that maybe the end of one race was only the start of another. The sun dipped low behind the city skyline as Mark and Tommy wheeled through the quiet streets of Santa Clara. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and distant ocean salt, a far cry from the cornfields of Iowa, yet somehow comforting in its unfamiliarity. Mark broke the silence. Why did you keep this all to yourself for so long? The medals, the records, the pain? Tommy sighed, shifting his weight in the wheelchair. Because I thought if I told anyone, they'd see me as broken. Less than the golden boy from Pine Hollow. I didn't want to be pitted or remembered as a tragedy. So I disappeared instead. Mark's voice softened. You carried that alone for decades. Mom carried it too. Tommy's eyes clouded with memories. I lost so much. Friends, love, even hope sometimes. After the accident, I thought my life was over. But Coach Bennett believed otherwise. He saw the fire still burning. Mark nodded. That fire saved you. Tommy looked over with a faint smile. It did. But it also burned me in ways I'm still learning to heal. Mark took a deep breath. It's never too late. We have time now. To fix what's broken. To be a family again. Tommy's smile widened, a flicker of the old Tommy shining through the weariness. I like the sound of that. A week after their reunion, Mark was back home in Pine Hollow, sitting on the porch with an old glass of lemonade, the letter from their mother folded neatly on the table beside him. His phone rang, an unexpected number. Reynolds, he answered, voice gruff but curious. Mr. Reynolds? This is Coach Bennett from California. Mark blinked, heart skipping. Coach Bennett? Is this about Tommy? Yes, the coach said gently. He asked me to reach out. He wants to make things right. With you, with your family, and with Pine Hollow. Mark leaned back, staring at the faded cornfields stretching beyond his porch. Memories flooded back. School games, family dinners, promises made and broken. Coach Bennett continued. Tommy wants to come home. Not just for a visit, to stay. To rebuild what was lost. Mark's voice trembled. I didn't think this day would ever come. There's one more thing, Bennett said quietly. Tommy's been training for the next Paralympics. He's aiming for gold again. And he wants you there with him. Mark smiled through the tears. I'm in, coach. Every step. He hung up, feeling the weight of decades lift. The past was still there, but the future, now that was something worth fighting for. When Tommy returned to Pine Hollow, the whole town seemed to hold its breath. Word spread quickly. The golden boy was coming back, but this time, in a wheelchair. Some folks whispered, some stared, but most waited with quiet hope. Mark met Tommy at the old train station, their eyes locking like teenagers again. I don't know if I'm ready for all this, Tommy confessed, gripping the wheelchair arms. Mark smiled gently. You don't have to be. We'll face it together. Days turned into weeks. The townspeople surprised them. Old friends showed up with casseroles, neighbors invited Tommy for rides, and even the mayor came by with a key to the city. The local high school invited Tommy to speak at assembly. Don't let anyone tell you your story's over, he told the crowded gym. We all face battles, some visible, some hidden. But every day is a chance to rewrite the ending. Afterward, a young girl approached him, eyes wide. Mr. Reynolds, can I be like you when I grow up? Tommy smiled, tears prickling. You already are. In that moment, Mark knew their family, and their town, was healing. Together. The gym smelled of sweat and determination. Tommy wheeled himself onto the track, the wheels humming rhythmically against the rubber surface. Coach Bennett was there, clipboard in hand, his eyes sharp but kind. You ready, champ? Bennett asked. Tommy nodded. Every day's a battle, coach. Mark watched from the sidelines, heart pounding. He felt both pride and a sting of helplessness. You sure about this? He asked after practice, once the adrenaline had faded. Tommy's eyes were fierce. If I'm going to win again, I need to push harder. I need to face the doubt, the fear, all of it. Mark hesitated. And if you don't? Tommy gave a small laugh. Then I fall. But I get back up. Again and again. It reminded Mark of their childhood. Scraped knees, late-night talks under starry skies, dreams bigger than their small town. This was Tommy's second chance. And Mark was determined not to let him face it alone. One evening, after a long day of training, Tommy and Mark sat on the porch of the farmhouse, the stars blinking softly above them like old friends. Tommy's voice was low, heavy with memories. Do you remember the night Mom found me in the creek? I was trying to prove I could be tough, like you and Dad. I slipped, and for a moment I thought I'd drown. Mark nodded. She was furious, but she was scared too. Always scared for you. Tommy sighed. That fear never left her. After the accident, she blamed herself. She thought she failed us both. Mark's throat tightened. She didn't fail. She loved you fiercely. Tommy looked out into the darkness. Sometimes love isn't enough to keep us safe. I carried that weight for years. Guilt, shame, loneliness. Like I didn't deserve a second chance. Mark reached over, squeezing his brother's hand. You deserve everything. Every chance. And I'm here. Always. In the silence that followed, two brothers healed a little more, the past no longer a chain, but a bridge. The town's annual fair was coming up, a tradition that hadn't changed much since the 1970s. Mark and Tommy decided to attend, hoping to reconnect with old friends and remind Pine Hollow that Tommy was still part of the community. As they wheeled through the crowded fairgrounds, an elderly woman approached, her eyes shining with recognition. Tommy Reynolds? Is that really you? She asked, her voice trembling. Tommy smiled shyly. It's me, Maureen. Been a long time. Maureen reached out, clasping his hand warmly. I heard about your medals. You're an inspiration. Mark watched as others gathered, sharing stories and laughter. Neighbors brought homemade pies, children asked for autographs, and local veterans saluted quietly. Later, as the sun set, a young man with a prosthetic leg came up and shook Tommy's hand. "Your story helped me when I was in the hospital," he said. "Thank you." Tommy looked at Mark, eyes glistening. "Kindness, it comes back to us in ways we don't expect." Mark nodded. "That's karma, the heart's own justice." Together, they realized that true victory wasn't just medals or records. It was the connections forged through compassion. As the Paralympics approached, the pressure mounted like a storm cloud. Mark could see the tension in Tommy's jaw, the restless pacing in the small cabin they'd rented near the training center. One evening, Mark sat beside him, voice steady. "You ever scared, Tommy?" Tommy let out a bitter laugh. "Every day. Scared I won't be enough. Scared I'll disappoint Mom's memory. Scared I'm just a shadow of the boy I was." Mark nodded slowly. "But you're not alone anymore. You've got me. And a whole town behind you." Tommy's eyes met his brother's, vulnerability raw. "What if I fall? What if I fail?" Mark reached over, gripping Tommy's hand tight. "Then we get back up. Like we always do. And this time, you won't be falling alone." The moment was quiet but fierce. A brother's vow, a shared promise that no matter what, they'd face the race together. The stadium was alive with anticipation. Flags waved in the breeze, crowds buzzed in excited murmurs, and the scent of fresh grass mingled with the distant echo of the national anthem. For Tommy, this was more than a race. It was a chance to rewrite a lifetime. He rolled to the starting line, every muscle tense beneath his jacket. Mark stood just off to the side, eyes blazing with pride and nerves. The starter raised the pistol. Silence. Bang. Tommy exploded forward, wheels spinning, muscles burning, heart pounding like thunder. For 40 meters he surged ahead, a comet blazing through the track. But then came the twist. One of his rivals surged, neck and neck, pushing harder, faster. Pain shot through Tommy's shoulders, but he clenched his jaw. Not today. In the final stretch, he summoned every ounce of strength, every memory of lonely nights, broken dreams, and unyielding hope. Crossing the finish line, he collapsed back in his chair, chest heaving. The crowd erupted. The scoreboard flashed gold. New world record. Mark rushed forward, tears streaming. "You did it, Tommy. You really did it." Tommy smiled through his exhaustion. "We did it, Mark. Together." The celebration faded into quiet nights filled with reflection. Back in Pine Hollow, Tommy and Mark sat on the porch once more, the golden medal resting gently on the table between them. Tommy traced the cool metal with a finger. "I chased this for so long. I thought it would fix everything." Mark watched him carefully. "Did it?" Tommy's eyes clouded. "It healed some parts. But the scars don't disappear. They remind me where I've been, and how far I've come." Mark nodded. "Mom always said that pain was part of the journey, not the end." Tommy smiled softly. "I'm ready now. To live without running from the past." Mark reached out, squeezing his brother's hand. "We're in this life together, Tommy. No more hiding. No more running." As the stars blinked above, the two brothers found peace and shared strength, the past no longer a shadow but a guide. The following spring, Pine Hollow buzzed with excitement. The local community center had been transformed into a hub of activity. Wheelchair basketball leagues, adaptive yoga classes, and even a Paralympic training program in the making. Tommy stood at the forefront, coaching and mentoring young athletes with disabilities. His smile was radiant, his spirit contagious. Mark watched from the sidelines, proud beyond words. "You've become more than an athlete," he said one afternoon. "You're a beacon." Tommy laughed softly. "I just want others to know they're not alone. That life doesn't end when it changes." One evening, as the sun set behind the rolling hills, Mark and Tommy sat on the porch of the community center, a crowd cheering in the distance. Mark turned to his brother. "So, what's next?" Tommy's eyes sparkled with hope. "Whatever comes. But this time, I'm ready to face it, with family, friends, and a town that believes. Together, they embraced the future, a second chance not just for Tommy, but for everyone who dared to dream again. The crowd gathered in the small town square for the dedication ceremony of the new Adaptive Sports Center, a dream born from struggle, love, and perseverance. Flags fluttered, children laughed, and the warmth of community wrapped around everyone like a blanket. Tommy stood at the podium, the gold medal glinting against his chest. His voice was steady but filled with emotion. "This isn't just my victory," he said, eyes scanning the faces of neighbors, friends, and family. "It's ours. For everyone who's ever felt broken, forgotten, or afraid, this is proof that second chances exist. That hope is stronger than despair. And that love never lets us go." He looked over to Mark, who stood beside him, eyes shining with pride and tears. "As I crossed that finish line," Tommy continued, "I realized something. The race never really ends. It changes course, challenges us in new ways. But with those who stand beside us, the journey becomes something beautiful." The crowd erupted into applause, a sound like thunder and sunlight combined. That night, under the stars of their small town, two brothers embraced, not as the boys they once were, but as the men they had become, stronger, wiser, and forever united. Because sometimes, the greatest gold isn't a medal, it's the love and courage we carry within.